Aegeo, architectonicas, alilepidrasis, στην Archaea, Macedonia, την Βόρεια Ελλάδα, τη Θράκη και τις ποντιακές περιοχές στην ύστερη κλασική και Hellenistic περίοδο. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Bonna Wescoat, Director of the American School of Classical Studies at Athens, and it's an honor to welcome you this evening and for the next 2 days to the symposium Beyond the Northern Aegean, Architectural Interactions Across Ancient Macedonia, Northern Greece, Thrace, and the Pontic regions in the late Classical and Hellenistic periods. The fact that we are having this symposium 3 years after the scheduled end of the project is a reflection of world conditions, which have not abated. Our heart goes out to our colleagues and their families in Ukraine, and now Turkey and Syria. I would like to call for a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. Now we're in the right place. Okay. Beyond the Northern Aegean was created as part of the Getty Foundation's initiative, Connecting Art Histories. The program is grounded in the conviction that, and I quote, "The power and vitality of any scholarly discipline rest on its ability to forge connections among people and ideas and across international boundaries. Connecting Art Histories aims to strengthen the discipline of art history globally and increase opportunities for sustained intellectual exchange across national and regional borders. The initiative springs from the recognition that art history develops fresh lines of inquiry when scholars from diverse regions, career stages, and academic training are able to inform each other's ideas and methodologies," unquote. Our Connecting Art Histories Beyond the Northern Aegean, conceived in 2018, has aimed to bring together scholars at different career stages from Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, Iran, Italy, France, and the United States. Architectural historians, archaeologists, historical geographers, and historians of material culture, all of whom share a fascination with the power of ancient Greek architectural design to connect the far-flung communities of the ancient Greek world and to forge a powerful means of communication between these communities and their neighbors. Thrace and the Black Sea littoral, areas that bordered and interacted with the Greek world but were not subsumed by it, offered an excellent opportunity to examine the creative dissemination, appropriation, interaction, and adaptation of Greek architectural ideas across a wide range of polyethnic communities and geographic circumstances north and northeast of the Aegean Sea. By joining scholars working in several modern countries that now encompass the Northern Aegean, Thracian, and Pontic regions, the program aimed to promote the collaborative study of ancient Greek architecture from a perspective that reinstates the centrality of ancient regional factors, land, sea, and people, and contemporary innovative methods of research, from investigation of design transmission, decorative ornamentation, and technologies to experimental archaeology, 3D modeling, and place studies, to investigate how and why diverse ancient communities north of the Aegean shared, adapted, and transformed ancient Greek architectural ideas to meet personal, civic, political, and spiritual aims. The members of our symposium chose to explore several key themes that will inform the core of this symposium this weekend, including architectural interactions across diverse ethnic and political communities, adaptation and persistence of traditions in the face of geographic diversity, design confluences and divergences, architecture and cult, architecture and death, iconography, ornament, and architecture in color, technologies of construction, and transporting and trading materials and ideas across regions. To capture it all, we decided on the title, Beyond the Northern Aegean. The long arc of world circumstances that led the Getty to see the need for connecting art history has had a strong impact on our mission. Our program was to be a 2-year travel seminar. In 2019, we started from the ancient capital of the Macedonian kingdom, sweeping across northern Greece, Thasos, Samothrace, up the Evros River to the Black Sea, and the settlements of Mesembria and Apollonia Pontica, and then across the central valley of ancient Thrace to Sofia. It was an extraordinary and virtually flawless trip. For the second year, summer of 2020, our plans were even more ambitious. We planned to start in Bucharest, follow the Black Sea coast from Histria and Kalatis to Sveshtari and Dionysopolis, and then the eastern side of the Evros River with Ainos, the Thracian side of the Sea of Marmara, the Troad, and then Ukraine to Olbia, Berezin Island, Odessa, and Kiev. But you all know what happened. We ended up on Zoom. And it was something of a lifeline. When COVID prevented our travel in 2020 and then again in 2021, we were fortunate to have wonderful colleagues who shared their knowledge of sites that we had planned to visit and other ones in remote seminars. We are deeply grateful to these scholars for sharing their expertise. Anca Dan, Alfred Stroe, Monica Marigino Caristiu, Letitia Nistor, Julian Biriscu, Adam Rabinowitz, Maria Magdalena Stefan, Sayat Basharan, Marina Koleva, Nikolai Sharonkov, Daniela Stoyevna, and Lorianne Martinez-Sev. Thank you. We are so glad to be able to remain connected. But if you look back at that Zoom photo, as I did just the other day, everyone's expression makes it very clear that it's good to be back in person once again, and now that we can also rely on Zoom to connect us as well. When we were stopped a third time in 2022 by the outbreak of war between Russia and Ukraine and its effect on neighboring countries, we needed another way to bring our group together. The Getty agreed that we could use the opportunity of this symposium in Athens to come together as our seminar and share our ideas with each other and with you. I'm grateful to the participants of the seminar who have demonstrated a remarkable resilience and tenacity years after their initial commitment. I would also like to thank Chavdar Sochev, Amalia Avramidou, and Ellen Archie, who have become honorary members of the seminar by virtue of their contribution to this symposium. Now, one of our key themes has been the persistence, adaptation, and transformation of traditions in the face of geographic diversity. And this goes to the heart of the work of our keynote speaker and seminar member, Anca-Cristina Dan. Anca is a researcher of ancient history and archaeology in the Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique, CNRS, and associate professor in the École Normale Supérieure, Paris. Her primary research interests center on the historical geography of the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, investigated through the critical confrontation of maps and texts and the geoarchaeological data obtained and interpreted by the geophysicists, geomorphologists, geochemists, paleobiologists, and archaeologists with whom she collaborates. Her current work concerns the reconstruction of ancient environments of Doriskos on the west side of the Evros River in Greece, and before that of Ainos on the east side of the river, modern-day Inez in Turkey. The Danube Delta as well in Romania, and the Taman Peninsula in Russia. Anca favors interdisciplinary and international collaboration in projects of 4D modeling of ancient sites for better understanding of the interaction between humans and nature. She is therefore the perfect scholar to open our program with her keynote address, Beyond the Northern Aegean, Setting the Stage, Spaces, Peoples, and Representations throughout the Balkans and the lower Danube Basin. Join me in welcoming Anca.
Κυρίες και κύριοι, είμαι πάρα πολύ ευτυχισμένη να μιλήσω εδώ στο Αμερικανικό Σχολείο για τη γεωγραφία των περιοχών πέρα από το Βόρειο Αιγαίο και θα μιλήσω στα αγγλικά, είναι καλύτερα για όλους, για μένα. So, thank you very much, Bonna, for the very kind introduction. Thank you all of you who are here in order to travel, at least with your minds, like the ancient people were doing most of the time in antiquity. In fact, those we are reading today, so we are traveling in mind behind the Northern Aegean. And I would like to start my presentation with a discussion we had with Professor Palagia on Facebook the other day, because many Greek colleagues or simply people on the Facebook were wondering why northern Greece is separated from Macedonia, Thrace, and the Black Sea region. I was answering that we defined these regions, or they were defined in the title, thinking of the contemporary, so late classical, Hellenistic, up to early Roman definitions of those terms. So we do not pretend that Macedonia, Thrace, and Black Sea don't belong to Greece, at least to the Greece in our hearts for the Black Sea area. But this is how Pseudoskylax, this Aristotelic text from the late 4th century BC, is defining the Hellas first, which goes until Ambracia and until the Peneion river. So you can see it here from the Ambracian Gulf to the Thermaic Gulf here. So this is Hellas, and we involved the northern Hellas, so the northern Thessaly and northern Epirus, in the Pyrrhus in our, let's say, interest area. And I will try to explain you through connectivity why and how we define this area. Then we discuss about Macedonia, so starting from the Peneos Potamos and the Thermaic Gulf, and going until Strumon, the Strumon River, where Thrace starts and go until the Black Sea. Well, like Pseudoskylax, this strange text, which I think now found its peace with a date in the late 4th century BC, so between Philip II and Alexander the Great, is that he presents a space a little bit like we had the chance to see it and to explore it thanks to Bonna. Because if you can follow the periplus, it's not a real periplus, so it's not a real boat. No periplus is a real periplus in antiquity. These are literary compilation in order to travel by mind. In this case, we imagine in a peripatetic Aristotelic school, in order to make an inventory of all the Greek cities around the internal sea, Mediterranean plus the Black Sea, in the moment of the Alexander conquest of the East. So when the Greek cities extend far behind the Near East and Egypt. Alexandria in Egypt is not mentioned, nor any other foundation of Alexander or the Diadochi. So this text is interesting because it explores the space, the mental space, just like we did. So following the coast, mentioning the Greek city in order to see the monuments. We are in a seminar for architecture, but also mentioning the connective links, in particular the harbors and everything which relates to the harbor, so in particular the islands and with their ports. So you can see here the mentioning. So he explores Macedonia and then Thrace, and he leaves the coast and he goes to Tassos, and then he does the same when he goes to Samothrace, exactly as we did see it. So I wanted to put here the passage on Samothrace, so Nessos Kailimen with the island with the harbor, and then goes back to the territory, to the Peria of the Samothrace, enumerating the sites which are still debated for the identification, except Zoni, which is now sure. Then the Potamos Hebros with the ancient maritime Gulf, and then Doriskos, then crossing to Ainos, and so on. So we see here go and forth between islands, cities, rivers, and so on, exactly as we tried to do it. And then the periplus goes through the Hellespont to the Black Sea, following again the coast, enumerating the Greek cities, mentioning their Hellenicity, and it's a very interesting point, why they are Greek and why they matter also for us, a center of spreading, let's say, Hellenism, and we'll try to understand. In any case, this is also our purpose, to say how this kind of Hellenization of cultural métissage or transfer culturel are working in the area, and then making the whole, at the end of the text, we have a whole sum of what all this trace means. I had a lot of difficulties to map the trace of Pseudosculax, because in fact, except modern maps, this does not correspond to any real political definition in antiquity. We can say that it is more or less the Odrysian zone, the Odrysian state and the Odrysian influence zone, but the Odrysian state does not go until the Danube. So it's really a geometrical conception which is not political, but rather, let's say, geometrical and, after Eratosthenes, geographical. In fact, we have to go to modern maps in order to have a complete map of the ancient trace, and we would start with Abraham Ortelius in the 16th century, who compiles all the ancient maps, and in particular Ptolemy. So also modern maps in order to see ancient trace, or rather modern maps in order to map the Roman regions, because this is the key to the only moment when the ancient people conceptualized all this region as a region. And it is the frontier region of the Romans with the construction of the so-called limes. So we have here on this map the provincial development in Illyricum, Moesia, and Thrace. So this is more or less what interests us here. We have also, again, modern maps in order to reconstruct ancient, and in this case, medieval realities, with this Bulgarian empire in the 13th century. So you see it covers also this so to say, previous Thracian, in a very large sense, region. And I told you that indeed the Romans made, so to say, a map and tried to identify the region as we try to do it now, and they did it because it is the frontier. And we have here the Tabula Nona, the 9th table of Ptolemy Europe, where you can see exactly the two things about which I will tell you more in the next minutes, which are the main elements of this area, so the Danube and the very complicated chains of mountains of what we call today Balkans in a large sense. The fact that this is a frontier zone, it's obvious also for the linguists who are familiar with this Žižeček line between the Latin influence and the Greek influence. It is contexted, it is not a good definition. Now we know it, but let's say that this shows that at least until the 20th century, this idea that behind the Northern Aegean we have a frontier between two worlds, if not the end of the Aegean world, it is something very well established in the minds of nearly everyone studying antiquity. I was telling you that for the Romans this was the frontier, a frontier to nowhere. So because we can look at the map as late as the Tabula Peutingeriana, which was originally put into one piece, let's say probably in the 4th century AD, and we can see that the Danube is the last limit to the Roman world which in this case is defined by the roads. So it is a road map, and the roads are finishing at the Danube. There are not roads and river roads behind the Danube. And we can see that also in this mental image of the 4th century AD, so copied, of course, in the beginning of the 13th century AD in the medieval West. And here in the 19th century copy of Miller, the Danube is doubled by mountainous ranges in order to show that there are still some roads there, military roads for the frontier, but there is nothing behind the Danube. So we are really at the end of the world, an image which is comforted by all the Roman geographical tradition. Of course, the Romans had maps of regions, and they knew that there is something behind the Danube, and the best proof is the best map we preserve today, which is sure, it's not contested. This is the so-called Dura Europos shield, preserved in the National Library in France, and it is oriented to the south, and we can see here the Romanian and Bulgarian coast of the Black Sea. So we are going here from, let's say, Ukraine. You can see here the Danube, Istros, then Calatis, Bisone, Odessa, and so on until Bosporus. So this is 3rd century AD probably. It fits very well with the Periplus of Arrian. So the Romans had this kind of things, and quite it was probably used as a decoration. Of course, we don't imagine the Romans doing military campaigns with that, but you know, like a prestige or a representation of a region where some military was before going to Dura Europos. Romans knew to make maps, and we have from these maps, unfortunately, in very late echoes, so the beginning of the medieval times, like this Albi Mappa Mundi, which is oriented to the east, and you can see here Europe with our Aegean, let's say, and Black Sea, so we are here with Greece, and as always in ancient and medieval cartography, we have text and maps, and we can go from image to text and from text to image in order to complete one with the other. And then here in a detailed regional map cut from a 5th century AD late antique maps, just like this one, so the model is common, but here we are in a regional cut of what it is the Orient in the 12th century, so we are in the context of the Crusades, and what we can see here, so again orientation to the east, here is Asia Minor, and here is our Greece from the Aegean, and the Aegean is here through the Straits, and this is the Black Sea. So this is how it looks, the Northern Aegean in late Roman, model 5th century AD, and then medieval reception of this. Why I'm showing you this map, which was associated with Hieronymus, so it is in the British Museum now preserved in a small manuscript, because it is a representation of the Christianization phenomenon, and in particular on these maps we have, in this map we have mentions of the cities which were visited by Paul in his travels. So Northern Aegean is a hot point, let's say, in connectivity, because Paul is traveling there from northwestern Asia Minor to especially Macedonia, and then to Greece. And then, because it is the earliest, so to say, regional map that I have found, cut more or less, containing what it is, of course, the best map for Greece, at least the first maps of Riga's map of northern, of Riga's map of Greece, of all the Greece, so starting from Italy up to the Black Sea, and we are with the Northern Aegean right here. I'm showing this map of Rigas because I think it is even more useful than we have the usually the maps, because it puts Greece, of course, in Rigas terms. This is the representation of the Greek Orthodoxy, so a big Greece before the revolution, and especially the Greek Orthodox communities. This is why my homeland Romania is on this map, so included into Greece, because we are Greek Orthodox. But what it is interesting is that it relates Greece to Italy, to Asia Minor, and to the Black Sea. And in fact, this is what it is the Northern Aegean about. It is a frontier, we said, but for the ancient people, a frontier is necessarily a crossing zone, a controlled crossing zone, a difficult cross zone, but nevertheless a crossing, a networking zone. So my presentation will be, first of all, shortly, why the Northern Aegean, then a short history of the representation of the behind the Northern Aegean region in ancient thinking, to see what the texts are telling us about this and how can we feel it, fit it with the archaeological material, and then very shortly I want to show you two things we are doing in Ainos at the mouth of the Ebros right now. Why I'm speaking of ancient geography here in front of you, most of you being archaeologists, because I think this ancient representation have a value, allow us in order to reconstruct the context in which the architectural monuments, let's say, or objects in any case were elaborated and were transferred. And then because I think that the reconstruction of this environment is really essential in order to do archaeology today and to give the full meaning of this object. So the aim of this paper at the end, I hope to convince you that this behind the Northern Aegean, so from the Adriatic to the Black Sea, including the Hymos, the Balkans, and the Danube, it's both a frontier skip, a border zone, and a connectivity area, if we want to judge by, let's say, traces, archaeological traces. And if we speak in cultural terms, it is a middle ground, of course, between the sedentary civilized world of the internal sea and the nomadic, less civilized world, barbaric world of the steppes. And I will tell you what is about why the mountains, the Carpathians and so on, don't appear in this sketch. I will tell you about this immediately. So my first point, why the Northern Aegean? My colleagues here, specialists of architecture, look a lot at marbles, and if we look at the map for sources of marbles, of course there are a lot in the Aegean, and there are also some in the Northern Aegean, especially Thassos and Proconnesos, and throughout the Northern Aegean we can play with the exportation of these marbles. This is a study which is not done. I would like to have it at least for Ainos. We try to work on it, but it's extremely complicated to have the samples. So it is something, let's say, ongoing. But we speak about connectivity, and of course the Northern Aegean, since the beginning, let's say, of Greek history, it is a strong point in connectivity, and this goes even stronger in Hellenistic times when we have the consequences of Alexander's conquest and the divisions between the Diadochi. Of course, with the Roman times, we have the roads, and I wanted to show you this map because we are working in Ainos, and I will mention it shortly at the end, on a branch of the Via Egnatia, and this is quite interesting to see how today we can find the segments and to understand that all these lines you see on these maps are in reality not lines but networks, so many trajectories and of principal and secondary roads connected with harbors and cities. So we should change a little bit our image of lines into a much more complex picture. And of course, for this Northern Aegean, there are two big networks, I would say, of roads with, of course, important segments, but also many other secondary segments, which are the Via Diagonalis, Via Militaris, and of course the Via Egnatia, which were used, of course, also throughout the medieval times. So a crossing region of exchanges, even in Byzantine times, and a region of conflicts, because if we take our period of time, so from the Macedonian expansion, we have on these river valleys mainly the expeditions of Philip II, and then of course of Alexander the Great, who discovered not only the Indus basin, but also he is considered to be the explorer of the Istros basins in the middle Danube of today, also going up on the river valleys throughout the Northern Aegean, and then with the Diadochi, of course, who probably established the most extended internal territorial states to their time. A region of conflicts, and the definition of the two big roads about what I mentioned about, so Via Egnatia and Via Diagonalis in the context of the end of the 2nd century BC and 1st century BC with the Mithridatic wars. And this is how we can schematize this with the roads and the river valleys going east-west and north-south through the different mountain regions and through following, more better to say, the different basin rivers. If I have to choose a map, a good map, an ancient map of this region, I would like to choose this one. This is a map which was done, you can see it's not a hazard, in 1453. It is preserved also in the French National Library. And what you can see here is a map oriented to the north, exactly with, let's say, more or less the eastern part of our region behind the Northern Aegean. The Aegean is here, and here is the Propontis, and until Byzantium, and here you have the Black Sea, and here you have the Danube with its tributaries, and here you have the basin of the Hebros with some tributaries. What you can see here, it's a region full of mountains, of obstacles, with some valleys between the seas and the Danube, but also with a lot of castles, and all this complex image, which is of course for the Byzantine and medieval times valid, it's more or less valid also for antiquity. It shows in any case the important elements we have to consider when we look at this region. So communication in order to make exchanges, in order to make the war, and all this dependent on nature. So a lot of mountains difficult to cross, river valleys, river basins, seashores, and of course the different cities which were developed there, or fortified points which were developed there over the time. So let's go in this short history of the representation of the behind the Northern Aegean. For Homer, so before, let's say, the 7th century BC and the Greek colonization, the Greek establishment in the Black Sea, of course, there is more or less the ocean, so there is no clear image. So we can see this very well at the beginning of the Song 13 of the Iliad, when Zeus is sitting on the Ida, so more or less like this, like us on this picture, and he looks around until the edges of the world and turned away his bright eyes from the war in Troy and look afar upon the land of the Thracian horsemen. So we have some ideas about the Thracian seashore until the mountains, and the Mysians that fight in close combats. So we look here, let's say in the region of Chalcedon and northwestern Anatolia, Asia Minor, and then of the lordi Hippemolgi that drink the milk of the mares, and of the Abi, the most righteous of men. So we go over the steppe to the people who use the milk of their animals, and the Abi, totally imaginary people whose name nevertheless suggests an Iranian origin, but the Greeks were never aware of the real meaning of the ethnic. In any case, they were translating it in various ways, referring to the people who would idealize people, utopic people living without violence, or abios, an eternal life, and so on. So not much for these edges of the world in an image of the Homeric internal sea, so Mediterranean and Black Sea again, here where the ocean is very close to this. And this is exactly what Strabo says, explaining Homer, that the mayor of Homer's day in general regarded the Black Sea as a kind of second Oceanus, and they thought that those who voyaged got behind the limits of the inhabited world, so crossing the Bosporus, just as much as those who voyaged far behind the pillars of Heracles. The Pontic Sea was supposed to be the largest of the seas in our part of the world, so just a big gulf of the internal sea. This is the image which remains throughout Greek and Roman antiquity, and for that reasons they called it Pontos, so the big sea. Now, when we try to go behind this image of the end of the world in Homer, or what is behind the North Aegean seashore, and we look at the content, and we have in the Odyssey the mentioning of the Ciconians, we have in the Aeneid, if we think of the Trojan migration to Italy of Aeneas, the mentioning of Ainos, which was then in Roman times associated with Aeneas, and so on. What we have to understand through these myths, through the Nostoi for the Greek returns, including Odysseus, and for the Trojan migrations, just like for the Etruscan migration, imaginary migration told by Herodotus, is the connectivity east-west. And this east-west connectivity passes through the Northern Aegean, on the Northern Aegean shore. And this is a historical archaeological reality, just like it is in the myth. We are, therefore, in the middle, let's say, with the Aegean, in the middle of this internal sea, between the end of the world, which were conceptualized in the Greek mythology by Atlas. So here, the Heracles stelae, columns, and Prometheus, who was here in the Caucasus, with an image which is between, in fact, two big straits, the Gibraltar and here the Kerch Straits, which were probably mentioned already by Scylax of Carianda in the 6th century BC. Scylax of Carianda, who worked, in fact, for Darius, the great Persian king. Oh, I have a problem with the images. Sorry. What I wanted to say is that there are also, unfortunately, the images are not showing up. The region is also, as I told you, characterized by the high mountains, which are associated with Boreas, the northern wind, and with the and with the Hyperboreans. So this is another, let's say, mental characterization of these regions. We have it from archaic times, end of Archaic period, with Aristeas of Proconnesos, behind the Black Sea and behind these big mountains, which were imaginary, so going from, let's say, northern Italy up to Caucasus, and then in the late classical time up to Himalaya. These are so the Boreas, and then the Riphaean mountains, behind which are living, again, utopic people, living a very big life, just like the Homeric Abii, and these are the Hyperboreans. And the Riphaean mountains are, let's say, more or less to the north, and then more and more sources in Roman times are referring to the Riphaeans are being in North Italy. But in reality, these Riphaean mountains are quite a mythical invention, let's say, and we have all kind of explanation of what Riphaean means, and what we can say. In fact, it is that they are coming, but unfortunately, I don't see my images. I'm really sorry. Something happened because all the animations disappeared. What I wanted to show you here is that this is the Riphaean mountains are probably coming through Iranian intermediary from the Mesopotamians, and are the column of the world situated in the extreme north. And at some point, of course, these were associated with the Haemus in the Northern Aegean. I think we have a big problem with the PowerPoint, but yes.
It said it appears that the images are not embedded in the PowerPoint, so this is why they don't show up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe should I continue like that, because I have also my computer. I don't know why there is a problem on the. If not, yeah.
You want to give me the card again so we can see it?
I don't know where. Yeah, because we could see it on the card very well. Sorry. bug on the... No.
It's missing from here as well.
We cannot put my computer. Okay, we have to continue like that because it's a... Yeah, there is a bug on the... let's continue. So I can go on. We are in a... I'm really sorry. Yeah, we are in a... No, we should...
Go down.
Yeah.
Here.
Yes.
Go back.
Yeah, it's okay. Let's say thank you so much. We are in a region, so I was trying to tell you about these high mountains, which are more or less conceptualized as linked to the Caucasus, analogous to the Caucasus, and a land of the Hyperboreans, so the ones who live behind the Boreas, the Borean region, the northern region. Here, idealized people all around. And I was telling you that these ideas of the Hyperboreans, it's an old idea, maybe with Oriental origin, but the idea of the Riphaean mountain behind which live the Hyperboreans, so the Riphaean, the northern mountains, must be borrowed, it's an hypothesis I make, by the Greeks from the Persians, with whom the Greeks are of course in contact in the 6th, 5th century BC due to the advancement of the Achaemenid Empire, and the Persians themselves probably took it from the Mesopotamians, who had this idea that at the north there is, of course, for the Mesopotamians, at the north there is the Caucasus, like a big axis mundi, from on top of which the sky is setting, and this must be the ultimate origin of the Riphaeans and of the big mountains myth. But of course, all this connection, Caucasus, the Haemus, the Balkans, and then the Alps, all mixed with a very vague idea of the Carpathians, because the Carpathians are not really known and not conceptualized until Jordanes, Getica, in late antiquity. All this, mountainous axis to the north, it's a Greek invention. So Iranian sources, but finally putting together the things, and through analogy and symmetry, it's something Greek. Another Greek invention is the invention of the continents, and we are here not far, of course, in fact, more or less on the border between Asia and Europe, and these continents, which for the Greek are more or less parts of the earth, so eperoi, were invented in the context of the confrontation with the Persians in the late 6th, 4th century BC. So the big distinction between Europe and Asia is passing through Bosporus Thracian and Bosporus Cimmerian, but also through a series of pontos, and as we said, the big Black Sea is the big pontos, so it's the difficult crossing, but we have also the Hellespontos, the Propontos, and so on, and in the at the end, we don't have a Pontos, we have Limne, because the Azov Sea was thought to be a kind of big delta for the Black Sea, and the Black Sea itself could have been thought as a kolpos, as a gulf, which would be finally filled by the delta of all the big Pontic rivers. A frontier between Europe and Asia invented, so at the end of the 6th century and the beginning of the 5th century BC by the Greeks. It's something that we do not find in any other Oriental vision of the world. So there are no continents. There is a big sea for the internal sea. There is a focus on the Near East, but nor the Mesopotamians, nor the Egyptians, nor the Iranians have continents. This is only for the Greeks, and then if it goes on, it is only from Hellenistic times, and more or less from Alexandria, that the others take this idea of, let's say, parts of the world. And it is, of course, a geographical setting, a geographical frame, but also a political frame, because in our region, behind the Northern Aegean, we have the Persians, and we have them not only coming here, so we have it, of course, until Macedonia, but also we know here, thanks to the discovery of this inscription in Phanagoria, on the other side through the Caucasus, around the Black Sea. So this shows that Darius, this inscription from Phanagoria, shows that Darius and his son Xerxes continued what Cyrus already started, so a conquest which goes east and west, but which goes here through Armenia and the Caucasus to the northern Black Sea, just as it goes here to the west through our northern Aegean. And this means that our story in Herodotus about the Black Sea with a big Persian campaigns is more or less an invention of what it was in fact two campaigns of Darius around the Black Sea, one going here through the Caucasus and the other going here until today Ukraine. So in any case, we are on spaces which, despite the division Europe versus Asia, East versus West, are coming together in key historical moments. And the idea of the Greek historians in general is not so fixed despite their efforts to make geometry in order to make a clear mental image of these spaces. And if we read carefully Herodotus, we can come up with an image of people who are nevertheless related one to the other, either through a mythical genealogy or through exchanges. And of course, we have the Greeks with the Thracians, with the Agathers, with the Scythians, and so on. So in this Northern Aegean, despite the relief and despite the division between the worlds, we are nevertheless in a connective area. And this is well arranged by Herodotus also in the geography, because he is, so to say, an inventor of the Istros river. As you know, he says that it takes the source from a city, Pyrene, which must be something like a confusion for Nampurias in Spain, but in reality, archaeology never confirmed the existence of direct contacts throughout the Istros Basin more than Austria. So when we try to follow Greek objects, we never arrive more than, let's say, Argeș or Desos in the Danube Basin, and then we try to see the connection, the indirect connection, transferring objects which are culturally related. So in this, let's say, big Thracian hinterland, before the arrival of the Celts, we never go farther to the west than Baden-Baden and Austria. So all this is nevertheless a synthesis made by the Greek sources of Herodotus, probably also by Herodotus himself, who heard a lot of names and tried to put some order into it, constructing east-west Istros, which was perfectly symmetrical to the Nile, which was flowing also north-west-east for Herodotus, and then all the tributaries, because Herodotus was knowing only about, let's say, Balkan, so Haemus Rhodope mountains. This is why he put all the tributaries he heard of, the Istros, or nearly all, like flowing from south to the north, because he was not aware of the existence of the Carpathians. So it's a different, it's a mixed images due to the fact that Herodotus tried to make sense of this Northern Aegean space. However, the idea of an Istros like a channel between east and west, in particular between Adriatic at some point and the Black Sea. So people were continuing to think that the Istros takes its source either very far away in the west, either to the north, either in an ocean, either in a lake, either on a mountain. But it should have had two mouths, one in the Adriatic, so in the region of Istria, Istros. So it's this is due both to linguistic and also to the karstic relief of the northern Adriatic, where people were not really able to identify correctly the tributaries and the river basins. And the Black Sea. And this idea of a channel, so doubling the northern big mountains, the Balkans, appears very clearly since Aristotle, so History of Animals, then in Scylax, we mentioned at the beginning, in Theopompus, Aeschylus, even Aeschylus, but it is a fragment, so it's not so sure. But let's say if it is not 5th century, really 4th century, we are sure that the Danube was considered, the Istros was considered as the channel between the Black Sea and the Adriatic, so like a very and very far away frontier. And of course, you all know that this is a very major geographical element in Apollonius' Argonautica, who offers a circumnavigation of the oikumene in a Ptolemaic perspective, so in order to show that the Ptolemies deserve to be masters of all this earth. Why? Because in particular Ptolemaeus II and Ptolemaeus III, because there is a mention in the Argonautica in the 4th book about the fact that the Argonauts, after going to Colchis, in fact they had access to Egyptian maps, and this means of course the Egyptians plus Greeks were the first to make all this periplus, not only through Europe and around Italy, but also here through Africa. So this is more or less what the Ptolemies were willing as their empire. And of course, a very nice discovery published in 2019 on an Oxyrhexus papyrus with a boat with the Argonauts crossing here in Libya with their boat. So Ptolemaic Empire on the Danube, and then Roman Empire, because the Romans were the ones to identify the Danube with the Istros. And this Danube was first constructed like a double of the Rhine in the north, in Germany, and then the first clear attestation of the fact that the Danube and the Istros are only one river comes from Augustus in the Monumentum Ancuranum. And it is confirmed by Ovid in the same time, and by Strabo, and well explained by Pliny some decades later. So we have to wait to the end of the 1st century BC in order to know that the Danube and the Istros are the same, and that the Istros is taking its water, so somewhere near the Rhine. Sometimes it was even confused, mixed with the Rhine. In any case, somewhere to the north. And this brings us, of course, to Ptolemy, which gives quite a good image, and he has very good information about the whole the Danube basin, because his geography is nourished by information of the 1st century AD. I was mentioning the network of people and the connections, and I wanted just in order to finish with these representations to make a short recall of a research I was doing in the last years with Consuela Manetta, our colleagues, in order to see how these myths and literary representations are depending on realities, on geography, and on archaeological representation, on archaeological monuments. And I want to mention here, so for the Hellenistic time, the example of the Tauropolos. This is a goddess which is well attested in Macedonia, which was, of course, identified with the Artemis, the one who had to do with Iphigenia in classical times, so between Boeotia and Attica, who is also attested in Megara and Peloponnesus, so an Artemis Tauropolos, and who in Hellenistic times from Macedonia spreads well in Asia Minor, especially to the west, but also in Mithridatic times to the east and northeast of Asia Minor, and which in Roman times it's related with a cult of Diana in Nemi. Why so? Because the Roman generals, in particular the Luculi, coming back from the Mithridatic wars, are revendicating, are taking over the gods, and all this literary mythological representation Mithridates could have used in his propaganda when using the Macedonian Tauropolos, spreading so in eastern Anatolia, well attested also in the Black Sea, in order to construct his Pontic Empire, and then export it finally to the Romans in order to show their power over the Pontic Empire. I'm finishing, and I'm really finishing now, with the, I hope they will function, two small movies, examples of what we are doing in Ainos, and where I'm trying to use all this geographical, let's say, and literary information more directly related with archaeology. And in fact, if you want my opinion about the geography of this Northern Aegean, if there is a way in order to make sense of all this region, leaving aside the very complicated names which were never associated with the same realities, because all these geographical realities are in fact socially constructed realities. So there are no coherent Balkans, let's say, until the 19th century. There are no, even the Danube, you saw, which was constructed and reconstructed in various times in antiquity, and the situation is even more complicated with the rivers. However, if we go on the field, the Basin rivers can, despite their various names and identifications, can serve as landmarks or watermarks, let's say, for us in order to understand how this whole region functions. So if you ask me how to define the coherence of this region or how to explain it, I would say that it is indeed a frontier, a borderland, a frontier scape, which is for ancient people very well related with connectivity. Any border zone, frontier zone, it must be connective. Then the best connectivity is, of course, water connectivity through rivers and sea. And for this, Ainos is a very complicated but good example because it controlled the access to the Hebros River, so the biggest basin of all this Northern Aegean space. And you have an image of what is Ainos today in Turkey. And here I wanted to show you a small reconstruction of what we did with geoarchaeology, geophysics, geomorphology, and our colleagues are helping us. We cannot see it on the big screen yet. So yeah, we thanks to the work of geophysicists and geomorphologists from Germany, Köln University, and of the archaeologists, we have tried to reconstruct a road of Xerxes describing Herodotus with the landscape which was, which could have been there. So based on what archaeology and geomorphology is telling us. So this is how Xerxes would have taken a boat and seeing Samothrace far away, went to Ainos and then looking for Doriskos, the big plain where he gathered all his troops before invading Greece and after having crossed to Europe. So after the crossing of the Hellespont, we crossed the Melas Gulf, so separating Chersonesos from the territory of Ainos, and we see Ainos here as it should have been looked in the 5th century BC, so like a peninsula. It was before, in Neolithic times, it was even an island, but now it was a peninsula at the mouth of the river, which was still far away. The delta was still far away, so it was a big maritime gulf, very wide, in order to put a lot of ships on this plain of Doriskos, where we are working now, which is really indeed a plain, as Herodotus describes it, so Aialos, because last year in October we worked there and we can see that Doriskos could not have a big harbor, and it was a very difficult place in order to have protected harbors, but all we have there, and which is now covered by the delta, is this Aialos, this plain. So our Ainos in front of this was always the political and military center, which had Doriskos only, let's say, like a secondary first foundation and military place, and then a small city. And Ainos, which was of course found by the Aeolians, so we are in the most western point of the Aeolis, with this big territory which allowed the people from Ainos to have also stones to construct, but also enough place to make agriculture and to look every day at Samothrace, as we always doing while working in Turkey. And this is how we imagine Doriskos, where we hope we could work in the future in collaboration with Krisa Karadima and Demna Terzopoulou. And here is how we could see it from the Hebros with some valleys that we are trying next year to investigate with the colleagues in Kiel and Turkey on the Turkish side. So again, the peninsula, and what we could establish after more than 10 years of geomorphological, geoarchaeological work is that indeed around this peninsula we have at least two important harbors. The one which is here is the oldest harbor. And all around there are necropolis from archaic to Byzantine times. And here we have a harbor which was developed and really constructed only from Justinian times, from 6th century AD, and then with very strong Byzantine and Genovese and Ottoman modifications. We have based our research on all kind of palynological, so these are not pure inventions, but are based on the seeds and on the pollens. We could see in the drills, and this is our story. And the very last thing I would like to show you, can we go back please to the PowerPoint? Inside Ainos, so this city of Hermes at the crossroad of different civilizations. We have we don't have many monuments in Ainos, so we have to go underground in order to find something ancient. Otherwise, the strong occupation throughout 3 millennia do not leave many traces, just like some small fragments I will show you immediately after. And we have studied this cave, which was called Pan Cave, and which has a history going back from Greek classical times until the 20th century. And I was trying to show a movie, but maybe we will go on the Sketchfab and try, even if I don't know if it is possible, to show you some fragments. This is what we are doing now in Ainos. We have made photogrammetry, and we are publishing this year a corpus of all the sculpted materials, so with all kind of also architectural fragments, starting from the 6th century BC to Roman and Byzantine times. You can see here a mixture, and I don't know if with this computer I am able. I wanted to. No, I will probably not be able. I wanted to take you to a trip inside this. Maybe I am able. This is 3D model of this cave I was telling you about. So you can see it here. We are now in Ainos. So, yeah, maybe we can advance. So, going into the cave, we can see. We should have seen. Okay. You can see, you can play it. It's free online. We did not publish it yet, but we wanted to put it online. So here it is, the entry with some archaic reliefs. You can see it here now. Sorry, here. You can see it here. Not archaic, but classical relief with probably Pan and the nymphs. And then this is like a trace of Greek times. And then if we go slowly into the cave, we can see how it was reworked in Byzantine times by the 11th, 12th century. These are C14 dates with like a funerary chapels, with a small altar here, and with some fresco. The funerary chapel, which is maybe somehow surprising for some, it was consecrated to Mary. And we can see here an icon of Mary and the child. I'm sorry, it's a little bit difficult. And there are around several other representations of Mary. This chapel is in such a bad status, so there are bones all over the place, and we are waiting now for the results from for genetics. It's such a terrible, in such a terrible status still after restoration, because it was used in Turkish times. So after the Greek left the city in 1923, it was used for a metallurgic workshop. So everything is quite destroyed, but we try to put together the pieces, and I hope by the end of this year, as you can see it by yourself on this sketchfab, you would be able to see some of the remains from Ainos. The pieces which are could be taken are now in the Edirne Museum, and there we could work thanks to Shahan Kırçun, the director of the Edirne Museum, with Said Basharan and my colleague Frédéric Marchand-Beaulieu. Thank you very much. Sorry for all the problems in the presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Wonderful. Are you willing to answer questions?
Yes, of course.
All right, I'll go over to the remote.
DigiMink.
Again, thank you so much. That was a tour de force, as you always give us. And I have several takeaways, including the fact that Greece invented continents. That was a new piece of material for me. And I just, so I thank you for that. I'd like to open the floor to questions, and I think also do this online. Now I've pushed the button. Okay, sorry. Well, maybe those in the room heard that I just was saying thank you to Anca for a brilliant presentation that was polymathic and sweeping and interesting in placing the Northern Aegean as both a connective and a liminal place. Thank you. I'm very happy to open the floor to questions.
Thank you for a really fascinating presentation. I'm wondering about the sort of mental map that the Romans would have had of this area. I mean, are they thinking of it as coming up from Greece, or are they thinking of it as coming over from Italy? And how does that change the way that they might conceive of contacting peoples, for example?
Thank you. So the Romans were coming, of course, from the Hellenistic world. So they were really going on Hellenistic traces. And in the case of the Danube, they are going on the traces so opened by Philip and Alexander for the middle Danube basin. And then using all the river basins which were used in previous times, so especially since late Macedonian times, so late classical times. These big roads, nevertheless, even if they correspond, of course, to traces, and you know very well, the Via Egnatia, so roads, let's say, paths which were used from historical times, so following the Northern Aegean for the Egnatia Via, and then following the maritime gulfs and the rivers, and then the Via Diagonalis or Via Militaris to the north. Even if they go, of course, on ancient paths, the Romans are the first to construct something. In Ainos, it's interesting because we could see the continuation of this Via Egnatia. As you know, the Via Egnatia is mentioned as more or less stopping to this Hebros River, which is very broad at the mouth in the delta, which is nearly 20 kilometers broad, so this ancient gulf. And we do not know anything. So Strabo is quoting Polybius, and we don't know what happened with Via Egnatia after Ipsala. And we know that also Ovid stopped there, went to Samothrace to make an initiation, and then he mentions the Samothracian Perea, and he said that somehow he wanted to continue on foot going to Tomis while he is narrating another periplus. So it's quite complicated, but around Ainos we have roads, Roman roads, and we are not really able to date them because we can see only the stones, but not far away from Ainos. So maybe if I go back to the PowerPoint, do I have the right to go to the map of Ainos? Can we see please the PowerPoint? Sorry. Not far from Ainos, so like 10 kilometers from modern Ainos, we can go down. Yes, we before that. Please go to the end of yes, there. So you should see now a map. 10 kilometers from Ainos, following what is now the Hebros River, we have found traces of what could be the first archaeological attested station of, let's say, on the Via Egnatia network, and it is in the natural reserve of Galagolu. And we could, I think I have suggested this date in the 1st century AD, so after Strabo. This means that Strabo is right and Polybius is right. Via Egnatia really stopped in the construction in the 1st century BC here at the Hebros, and there was intense activity of Roman construction in the time of Nero, which is well attested epigraphically. We have like 5 inscriptions mentioning stations and military station on a Via Militaris in Nero's time, so in the years 60 of the 1st century AD, and then this probably traces of station with Roman roads here going up to the actual city of Enes should be dated to the 1st century AD. So what I wanted to say is that the Romans, took over what it was from history, so the paths on the valleys, the paths near the coast, the navigation, and so on, but also constructed themselves the roads in order to be able to make the conquest and to support their advancement to the north. I don't know if I answered your question, but of course.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I just was curious about the line of the limes and how it comes down. It comes down from the north. It comes down from Germany, and Marcus Aurelius is up with the Macromani up in that area as well. So they come in from the north and then come down, as well as going across to Greece, right?
This is something which happens in the time of Augustus, and Professor Eck was the first to say that in fact Augustus imagined this limes, and this is why I think, also agreeing with Professor Eck, that the construction, the connection between the Danubius River, which was known to be related to the Rhine, so just like the Rhine, near the Rhine, and the Ister River, which was to the Black Sea, this was a theoretical connection at the beginning for the Romans, and it's a theory which was in agreement with what Augustus probably himself imagined as the Roman limes, so coming both from Germany and also from the Northern Aegean and the Black Sea. And this is why they hypothesized that the two rivers could be one, just like of course, classical people imagined that the Danube and the Adriatic, the Black Sea and the Adriatic were related by the Istros. All these are mental constructions in order to justify power. We saw that with Apollonius of Rhodos, this was the Ptolemaic Empire. With Augustus, we have the Roman Empire and the limes. But it was true that the Danubius was the Ister, but still at the beginning was a theoretical hypothesis, which is proven and then really used military in the 1st century AD, when we have the time of real construction and then conquest. Of course, Vespasian is another important moment, and of course Trajan in Dacia. What we don't know, what is missing in this picture, is we don't know much about the geography of Dacia and of the Trajan campaigns over the Danube. We have, of course, inscriptions. We know about the Apollodorus bridge from later sources until Procopius. We know that a channel was constructed by this inscription and so on, on the Iskar, but we don't know what Trajan knew about the geography of what was behind the Danube, and we are surprised not to have any information about the Carpathians, which of course he crossed. So behind the Danube remains a little bit like on Tabula Peutingeriana, something which is not described, and of course the roads are quite rare in that region.
Thank you, Anca, for this wonderful talk. I'm particularly interested in this late, part of your talk when you spoke about Ainos, and I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit more about the context of the finds in that cave. And I was particularly struck by the early capitals and what is their, set. I mean, do we know anything about this? This was very, of course, I think that this is a rich part of your work that you try to provide this overview, and maybe you glossed over a bit at the end. Can tell us a bit more?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, we have to finish the project this year in Ainos, so we are now publishing the results. So this cave is in the middle of the modern city. It is down the what we call Acropolis or Burg, the fortified city here. There are many, this calcar bedrock in Ainos is very soft, so it is easy to make cave. There are quite a lot, especially from Byzantine times and then Ottoman times. People were living there, probably also in antiquity. We have a lot of mentions in Hellenistic times. For example, Lycophron mentioned caves and Hecate cults and so on, not only on this side of the Hebros, but also on the other side in the Samothracian Perea. So caves are nothing unusual. What is interesting in this cave is here, so we are getting in now here, like that, and here is this Pan and the nymphs relief, which is really damaged, but we can still guess that it is something maybe from the 4th century BC. This is why I was interested in this cave, and I think that they extended in Byzantine times. By C14 we have dates of the 11th, 12th century. The frescoes were made several times. They are badly damaged, but they must be so after the shape of the Theotokos from the 14th century. But the bones are in the tombs, which are unfortunately mixed, and we try to put some pieces together by genetics now. We are waiting for results. So the people buried here were already buried in the 11th century, so much older than the frescoes. And then this funerary chapel were used in Byzantine times and with other wood arrangement inside, because we have C14 dates on wood, on like sarcophagi or things which were decorating the place from the 17th century AD. And as I told you, it was totally destroyed in the 20th century when they made the workshop, metallurgic workshop, and you can see here, in fact, they used this, and there was a lot of smoke in order to get out the smoke on this side. So this is about the cave. It was traditionally called from the beginning of the 20th century by the Greeks living still in Ainos before 1923, like Pan cave. So they knew something about this relief, that it belonged to Pan. And then it was also knew as belonging to Agia Triada, so in Byzantine times. This is about the cave. Then what we are doing, and you can see, I can give you the address if you want to look on Sketchfab. Some models are in open access, and we put them here, and we are publishing them in a book in French and Turkish, hopefully this year. So there are all kinds of architectural elements, as you can see. So these are very well known for Aeolic capitals, which are already published for several decades by Said Basharan. They have good parallels in Izmir, and they are in Kalkarus, probably locally Kalkar. So Ainos was an Aeolic city, and there is absolutely no problem with that. 6th century BC, we are still in an Aeolic world. Then we have all kinds of fragments which are unfortunately never found in an archaeological context. They were, given by people who are making agriculture around, and they were brought to the Edirne Museum, and we try to put them together, including with pieces about which we knew, and also some pieces in the Louvre, because I found also like 2 funerary reliefs in the Louvre coming from Ainos, so everybody picked something from there passing by. And what we can see, so beside these very diverse architectural fragments of all times, I told you there are many Roman pieces and Byzantine pieces of all kinds of columns and capitals, or even architectural decorations like that. We have reliefs, we have pieces of funerary monuments, we have statues of different qualities, mostly of Roman times. And it's most of them without provenance. So it just shows the destruction, but we still try to put them together and to show by small pieces the huge diversity and the richness that Ainos should have had, despite decay, let's say, in Hellenistic times. but the reinforcements of the city in Roman times. So Ainos was strong in archaic times. It was still rich in classical times. We have a huge, Said Basharan, through his excavation, has a huge quantity of Attic material of the best quality in the necropolis. And of course, these are the only necropolis known from Eastern Thrace, so this can be also a factor which temporized, but in any case, a lot of Attic material, and then something like more regional, let's say in Hellenistic times, and coming again strongly in Roman times with reurbanization, with urban villas, with mosaics, of course not so nice, but still urban life. And then a new reinforcement in the 6th century with Justinian, with the construction of the walls, and so reconstruction of the walls, and so on. Yeah, I don't know if I answered.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Other questions from the floor? I just have one, Anca, if I might, about geography, and you mentioned the extraordinary width of the mouth of the Hebros River, and I was wondering if, in relationship to the Danube and in scale, is the Hebros anywhere near as navigable? I mean, is it wide but navigable, or at what point does it cease to be navigable? Does it go all the way up through the center of modern Bulgaria?
It was at least until Plovdiv. I think in any case it was until the 19th century it was navigable until Edirne, Adrianopolis, so in Turkey. And then some parts, or in any case I think in antiquity maybe probably until Plovdiv. And then by the tributaries, some of the tributaries were navigable, but of course we have to deal with seasons and with different climatic changes over the years. And we also have to make clear with what it was navigable. What we know from Arian is that the Thracians were using monoxyli, including on the rivers, so in the context of the Alexander conquest. So probably most of the tributaries up to very high in the Rila mountains, the Ebros is coming from the Rila, were navigable. If not navigable with ships, at least they were certainly doing, and this is the case throughout Bulgaria and Romania until the 20th century, they were letting the wood float on the river, and it is still something because, of course, Thrace was an important source of wood for shipbuilding, and this is something we can see very well by palynological studies and charcoal analysis. The Greeks made huge fires when they arrived in the 7th century BC, and then with the Romans we have really huge destruction with the urban way of life. This is what we see in Ainos. But yes, so Hebros, really the biggest highway, let's say, just like the Danube, navigable until the 19th century. The difference is that, of course, the progradation of the delta in the late 19th and then 20th century was doubled by the irrigations for the rice fields in Turkey. And also the deforestation, which continued, and pasturing, and all this brings sediments into the delta and transformed the biggest river into something which has very small water today. If we go, there are 2 channels with quite a small part of water. And of course, all this is also after the 1950s with the development of the agriculture on both the Turkish and the Greek side in the delta. So there are fields with rice and cotton. But otherwise, until the 19th century, no problem to go to Edirne by a big boat from Izmir.
Well, thank you very much. If there are other questions, or if there are not other questions, formally, we can informally adjourn to a reception. And again, Anca, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation.